Halloween is my favorite holiday. Is, not was, despite the events that unfolded one crisp Hallows Eve when I was about 16. At the time, I lived with my parents, younger brother, older stepbrother, and cousin in a big but old house that sat in a cul-de-sac close to Main Street. Behind it ran an alleyway flanked by apartments, and it had a huge yard that my basement bedroom looked out on. We lived in a small town. Crime seemed minimal in the area, and I made my way out that Halloween night to make the most of the best day of the year. It wasn't just what happened that night, though. It was, of course, what came after and one small incident that came before. A few days before Halloween, my stepbrother and cousin arrived at home to discover a pickup truck full of dudes taking photos of our house. It was weird, but when approached, the men seemed friendly and complimented our Halloween setup. It was pretty great, that is true. The men sped off without incident and were quickly forgotten. My stepbrother and cousin reiterated the story on Halloween night. The big event itself, at about 3 a.m., both had been out drinking with their friends, and as such, both had left their respected vehicles and braved the icy walk home. My cousin arrived home first, but couldn't seem to get his key in the lock, so just sat on the porch and waited until my stepbrother showed up. He did, about a half hour later, after having a bit of a laugh at my cousin for being an uncoordinated goober. He went to unlock the door himself, and no luck. So they just bit the bullet and called my mom, waking her up to let him in. She was, of course, unimpressed to be opening the door for a pair of drunk idiots at this time of night, and didn't buy their story about the funny lock. They insisted, though, and to shut them up, she finally tried her key. She, too, could not get her key in the lock. Annoyed, she tried, and now just was confused. She wrote it off as a problem for tomorrow, and the three of them should just hit the hay. One other person arrived at home late that night. It was me, though I arrived much earlier than those two. I was in my bed by about midnight. I woke up close to 1 a.m., still tired. All I could feel was anxiety, though, and I didn't know why. At first, I tried to tell myself that I was just in too much of the holiday spirit and had psyched myself out, but then I noticed a shadow. It was perfectly man-shaped and cast upon my window. I turned to my bedside lamp, blinked, and it was gone. It wasn't unusual, mind you, to see the shadows of people harmlessly walking through the alley, and I told myself that's all there was to it. Then, there was what happened after that. I came home from school the next day. My parents were there. So was the locksmith and the police. My parents were there because, well, that's where they lived. The locksmith was there because my mother had called him, and the confusion over the broken lock persisted. The cops were there because the locksmith and my parents called him. I was relieved to see that that's where the knife's tip had ended up. Also, they discovered that 2 of our window screens had been slashed, one on our garage and one on my bedroom window. This happened in 2001 on Halloween night to be specific. I was 7. If you want to know about my current age, do the math. My mom helped me remember this one, so if there's any further questions, I will have to ask her, as she remembered the night vividly. It was freezing, probably within the 20 to 30 degree range. I was hell-bent on going out anyways. I wanted my pillowcase to be stocked full of sweets, damn it. I dressed as a cat. Not too hard to imagine that. Now, at the time, I had zero idea, but my rock star mom was on it, and you can thank her for her on-par memory. My mom noticed a very tall man dressed in black. My mom said that he had on black jeans, black trench coat, and a black hockey mask. He had no kids with him, so that was a huge red flag to my mom. But he did have a pumpkin basket to put the candy in. He followed us around, house to house, but he always stayed 3 to 4 houses back, according to my mom. After 20 minutes or so, she shrugged it off, thinking that this was some really tall kid just innocently out trick-or-treating. But the more she said she kept shrugging it off, the more uneasy she felt. Now, I do remember my pillowcase was only half full and my mom hurrying us home and me being super pouty about it. I do not, however, remember my mom putting the house on lockdown after we got in the front door, but she remembers, and she said she did it very quickly. I ate some candy, brushed my teeth, and got into bed. My mom laid down next to me. I remember this, and I thought it was a little weird since I was sleeping on my own at 7. Now this is where my mom really helped me out with the story, as I had no idea until we talked about it earlier. Fast forward to the morning. There was a pumpkin basket full of candy with a note on the top that said meow and chicken scratch on our front porch right outside the front door. My mom threw out the candy in case it was tampered with, and she burned up the note. Now what creeps me out, and I just found this out from my mom earlier, is that in the middle of the night, she got up from my bed to recheck the house, looked out the window, and saw him in our front lawn, staring at the house with the pumpkin basket in his hand. She didn't think he noticed her. She called the police immediately. She briefed the officers on what happened, and the officer said he'd do a few rounds and patrol the area the rest of the night. My mom never heard back from the officer that night, or actually never heard back from him at all, as a matter of fact. My mom also told me that she stayed up there the entire night with a pistol on her lap after seeing him in the front yard. Since that night, and up until right now, nothing weird with him has happened since. This happened to me back when I was 21 and living downtown with my boyfriend. I had just found out that my boyfriend, who I had been with for almost 4 years, had been cheating on me. We were invited to a Halloween party that night and had initially declined the invite, but then I found out about the cheating and told him I was going and he could stay home if he wanted to. We were in the process of breaking up and dividing our assets. Anyways, the breakup is relevant to my frame of mind. We lived in a rather sketchy area downtown, one of those brand new apartments built in a slummy area. And any other night, I'm the type who keeps the windows up and all the doors locked until out of the area immediately surrounding our apartment. However, my mind was understandably elsewhere, and I had both the driver and passenger windows down so I could smoke a cigarette. The first red light I came up to on the way to the party was still in the shady part of town. I'm the first car at the light, so I have a full view of a 20-something-year-old guy crossing the crosswalk, left to right in front of my car. Suddenly, he looks over and makes eye contact with me. I'm flicking my ash from my cigarette out the window at this point, and may have done a polite head nod, I can't remember. Next thing I know, he picks up his pace and walks over to my open passenger window, leans into my car, and asks if he can have a light. When flustered, I tend to be polite, so without really thinking, I hand him a lighter. I was totally prepared to just pull away when the light turned green and let him have it. That's when, instead of reaching for the lighter, he reaches into my car and lets himself in. He just sits down like we were old friends or something. At this point, the light turns green, and I grab my purse and wedge it between my leg and the driver's side door. Apparently, I was more concerned about being robbed than the darker alternative. He thanks me for giving him a ride, and I slowly pull away from the stoplight. Cars are behind me, and I ask him why he got into my car. He replies that he could tell I wanted to give him a ride, and launches into an obviously fabricated story about needing a ride because his girlfriend had just broken up with him and had left him stranded downtown. I tell him I'll take him to the nearest gas station as I needed to get gas. I really didn't need gas. This was just the closest place to our location, which was well lit and sure to have people. The gas station was only about 6 blocks away, but it was the longest 6 blocks of my life, and asks me if he can have money so that he can get a cab home. Like an idiot, I offer him $4 in quarters I keep in my car for parking meters. At this point, I think I was just ready to make him stop talking to me and leave me alone. Instead, he starts throwing the quarters one by one down the cleavage of my shirt. What the fuck? I ask him to stop, and he just laughs. Then, I see it, the gas station. I pull in and tell him we need to both get out so I can pump. He hesitates and then gets out. I never locked my doors so fast in my life. I walk inside, telling him that I need to prepay. Instead, I find the first group of people I can find. It was a college town and Halloween weekend, so they're out in costumes and everything. And I explain the situation. At this time, a guy with the group I'm talking to comes in and tells his buddies that this guy is out here telling him that I'm his girlfriend, and that I accidentally drove away with my purse on the top of the car. No. The group of college kids ended up going outside and making him leave, and then sticking around until I got back into my car and on my way. I have no idea what his intentions were, but to the unwanted hitchhiker downtown, I hope we never meet again.